and we'll get started. Jeff will kick this off first. Go ahead, Jeff. Do I need to share? You going to have any slides?
No.
Okay.
So, good evening, everyone. I'm here to talk about the endangerment finding, and I'll touch on the report that Tom mentioned. Um, so, the EPA determined that based on scientific assessments and weight of evidence, that six long-lived greenhouse gases collectively threaten public health and welfare in the United States through worsened ozone, heat stress, extreme events, sea level rise, water stress, ecosystem and infrastructure harms, and more, and that those threats increased over time. And they also found that new motor vehicle greenhouse gas emissions meaningfully contribute to the problem. Okay, basically, as the Times put it, without the endangerment finding, the EPA would be left with no authority under the Clean Air Act to regulate the greenhouse gas emissions that are accumulating in the atmosphere from the burning of fossil fuels, leading to rising seas, fiercer storms, more deadly heat waves, and other extreme weather events. Okay, so to do that, the EPA looked at sources such as the IPCC, the National Research Council, um, focusing on health and welfare impacts, and they used what's called weight of evidence judgment, which says that not all risks can be quantified, so the administrator needs to use expert judgment across multiple risk categories rather than a single metric. And they discussed near-term and long-term risks for this. So what they found in a few categories was in the area of public health, um, air quality was threatened, heat stress and mortality would increase, sea levels would rise, perhaps to an extreme level. There would be a likely increase in allergens, um, diseases, both food and water, and vulnerable populations such as children, the elderly, and low-income communities are disproportionately at risk. In the area of public welfare, there were risks that span agriculture and food production, forestry, water resources, sea level, energy, infrastructure, ecosystems, wildlife, and they found the strongest evidence affecting water and coastal impacts. Higher risks to the supply and quality of water from floods and droughts, and risks grow as temperatures rise. Elevated storm surge flooding risk now and worse ahead. They're experiencing that right now with Hurricane Erin, which is not even touching land, but the effects on the Outer Banks are quite significant and very dangerous. There are also effects on energy and infrastructure, higher peak electricity demand, hazards to hydropower, as we see out west, where you know dropping levels of Lake Mead um, could be threatening the generation of power, notwithstanding the threats to water supplies that are going to be there. There's threats to ecosystems and biodiversity, threats to agricultures and forests, and endangers welfare of current and future generation. So that was their assessment of what the long-term effects of greenhouse gas air pollution would be. They also looked at motor vehicles and found that their estimation was that vehicle categories account for about 4% of global greenhouse gases and just over 23% of US greenhouse gases. Now, that might be inaccurate currently. It's probably not smaller, but that was their estimate at the time. And that was larger at the time than the total national emissions of almost every country except China, Russia, and India. So the Supreme Court recognized motor vehicle emissions make a meaningful contribution in a case called Massachusetts versus EPA in 2007. So that's the context against which the critical review of impacts of greenhouse gas emissions on the U.S. climate, the DOE report, was produced. And it argues that mainstream projections depend on scenarios and models that overstate warming, that U.S. tide gauge data show no obvious acceleration in sea level, that ocean acidification impacts are overstated, and that U.S. emissions cuts alone would have negligible direct climate effects in the near term. So all those things are the main arguments in this Department of Energy report that was released, I think, within a couple of days of when the announcement was made at the EPA that they were going to try to repeal the endangerment finding. Now, most of those claims are disputed. As a matter of fact, just for example, one climate scientist, Zeke Hausfather, he said that this report had 5 authors and was rushed over 4 months and would not pass muster in any traditional scientific review process. He said basically the paper was a farce. Okay, so point by point, where the report said models are unreliable and the scenarios exaggerate warming, the same person, Zeke Hausfather, said that the DOE cherry-picked a single supplementary figure from his study and ignored the central finding of the study that older models predicted observed warming well. So this is, in his words, indicative of a big problem with the report of selective citation. Okay, another point raised in this report, most U.S. extremes show no long-term increase. Another scientist calls this misleading. Research shows hotter, moister atmospheres are increasing hazards, and looking only at national aggregates hides clear regional signals. Another scientist pointed out the fact that wildfire area has surged. Canada, I think, is having its second biggest wildfire season in history, second or third, following last year's major wildfire. Their point that sea level isn't accelerating. The current observation of sea level rise are consistent with the IPCC reports, and many U.S. tide gauges do show significant acceleration, especially on the East Coast. The East Coast is particularly vulnerable to sea level rise, and certain tipping points, such as a slowdown or cessation of the Atlantic meridional overturning current, could, in the very near future, cause a significant sea level rise on the East Coast just from thermal expansion of the water. The report also talks about the underestimation of climate scientists about solar natural variability, which is one of the things they throw out as, well, the climate's not really warming, it's the sun is going through a natural variable cycle. Another scientist talks about how they cherry-picked discredited total solar irradiance reconstructions. Ocean acidification, that the report says is overstated. The scientist whose work was cited says his study isn't even relevant to the modern ocean acidification impacts. The rapid CO2 rise is quickly reducing carbonate saturation, and that's what many sea animals use to build their shells and also coral reefs. So, um, finally, U.S. actions have undetectably small climate effects, so policy changes are futile. This has been pushed back by other scientists, saying that this is really a policy non sequitur masquerading as science. So, in short, across models, sea level, solar forcing, ocean chemistry, weather extremes, damages, climate scientists report that this DOA document selects outlier studies, misreads mainstream assessments, and omits contradictory evidence. So basically, what the EPA is doing is attempting to take away all the EPA's authority to regulate fossil fuel greenhouse gas emissions and auto emissions using a report that has been called a farce. So I could go into these points, each of them more deeply, but I think everyone probably gets the gist of this. This is a political move. It's not backed by any science. It's not backed by more than the four or five. Uh, I don't want to say climate scientists. I think that's insulting to real climate scientists that put the report together. But it's really a uh, um, a comedy if it didn't have such horrendous implications.
Jeff, there have been, as far as I know, there have been groups organizing to speak out against this repeal. And is there anything else we can do other than we did sign on to one of those? Is there anything we can do?
Well, I mean, I think what everyone could do is contribute to the comments going to the EPA. I think they're accepting comments, written comments until September 15th. So I think what we can do is, submit written comments and just add to the uh, hopefully torrent of criticisms of this action and make it clear that if they want to go ahead, that they're doing it really in the face of massive public opposition. I think really their hope here is that they'll issue this repeal, it'll be litigated, it'll get to the Supreme Court, and then the Supreme Court will accept the repeal. That's probably the game plan.
or do nothing. The other thing, Jeff, I just wanted to mention that Jeff points out some significant scientists, but literally hundreds of scientists are signed up as groups to make it clear their position. Everybody should know that something like 97% of scientists believe climate change is real and refute all of this. But even if you look at 3% of the scientists that fall prey, that's exactly who they have writing this document here. The few people, perhaps because of the way they're paid, I don't know, but who knows?
Yeah, and one suit has already been filed
Ah,
that points out that even the way that this report was written and the way that the people were chosen to write it is apparently in violation of the Federal Advisory Committee Act of 1972. Okay, that doesn't allow federal agencies to recruit or rely on secret groups when engaging in policymaking. The law requires that any groups developed to advise federal policy must be disclosed and that meetings, emails, or other records be made public. So none of that happened.
Okay. But I
Um,
noticed Paul put
I,
in the chat something. Go ahead, Karen, but there's something in the chat about how you
There's
can,
a link, yeah, a link to the report that Paul put in, and I just put in the link to where you can submit comments if you want to. And we can give you talking points if people need it. If you let us know.
Before we go on to the next topic, I don't know if you had anything else, Jeff, but you know, we could spend a couple of minutes if there's a few questions for Jeff, making sure that comes out here right now.
John has a hand up.
Go ahead, John.
Yep. Yeah, thanks, Jeff. I would like talking points, as Karen points out, because I clearly can make summary statements, but if we can take some talking points of a particular group besides the IPCC, the climate scientists as a group, however we can make a more knowledgeable comment, I'd like to have some of those bullet points. Because I think we all should make comments, frankly. I mean, at this point, we should do all we can. And to the degree that we put our own emotions in it, it's fine. But I think we need to have also some backup to kind of refute their lack of backup. So
Perfect.
I do like the talking points and would appreciate it.
Yeah, and I'd be happy. What I was reading from was a longer document with talking points. So we'll save the chat, and anyone that puts an email in the chat, I'll make sure to send this document to.
Yeah, make sure everybody has their name and email address in the chat because we'll get a copy of the chat and we'll get a copy of the link to the video of this session in case you missed part of it or want to share it with others.
I think we should mention that Karen gave a verbal or an oral statement, and that Jeff is scheduled to do it tomorrow.
Tomorrow, yes.
And then that will be closed down. But Jeff, could you just take a minute to talk about what the possibilities are in terms of the states, what they could do if we come to the end of the road?
From what I've seen, it is possible for states to pass their own endangerment findings that would, again, within the state, mandate some of the same things that the EPA did back in 2007. Another thing to keep in mind is that, strangely enough, there are groups like the U.S. Chamber of Commerce and fossil fuel companies that are really not chomping at the bit to get this repealed because they fear that it will put them in danger of a lot more litigation when people raise these same issues of health and pollution, all the things that the endangerment finding covered. It doesn't mean that they don't exist at the state level. It just means that the EPA is going to use them as the basis for regulating.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean that other groups can't file suit to try to enforce the same kind of regulations based on harms they've suffered.
It's interesting, Jeff, that 73% of people believe climate change is real. And when you have a statistic that's proven out by many different polling organizations along those lines, that the Trump administration is doing this, a blatant thing. Basically, what you see, ignore what you're seeing. And what I think Jeff is making a good point because I think in a few years, based on drill baby drill that's occurring right now in the repeal of so many things, like the IRA, that it's going to be extremely obvious how the big mistake this is if they pull this off. And that's not going to bode well for anybody at that time, including us. But anyway.
If I could just hop in, Audrey had a question in the chat asking Jeff, could you please repeat the info about the rule against picking researchers?
Yeah, I'm looking at this is an article from the New York Times on the 15th, and it refers to the I'll copy this to um, the Federal Advisory Committee Act of 1972 is the regulation that is referred to here.
Is there any more for Jeff then? Well, thanks a lot, Jeff. Pam, I guess you're next on the agenda here about the legislative wins and losses and all of that kind of thing. Do I need to share your screen or anything? You got any slides or anything?
No
Okay,
slides.
go ahead, Pam.
Well, this past year we formed the first Illinois legislative action team for the chapter. We've done sporadic efforts to affect legislation in the past, and some of them have been successful. But this was the first time we actually followed specific bills, made sure that we notified all of our members. So we chose priority bills from each of the teams that are working in the chapter. And I'm not going to go through all of the bills, but we did have a group of them under the energy category, including the Clean and Reliable Grid Affordability Act, which was a huge comprehensive bill that was being pushed by the Illinois Clean Jobs Coalition, and also some other related solar legislation that we were really excited about. And so we picked several bills in the energy category. We picked several bills in the transportation category. One that we were that has the same kind of feel to it. It's very big, the Clean and Equitable Transportation Act. And along with it, the Metropolitan Mobility Authority Act, which, as you know, is the one that has to do with what the transit system is going to look like for the Chicagoland and including the collar counties. We also put in our own bill on trying to getting money to electrify school buses throughout Illinois. So we put our own bill together. Bruce Mainzer worked with a sponsor to get that one introduced. Amy Bartucci's team prioritized a number of things under the waste category, such as disposing foam foodware, or not disposing it, sorry, banning it from disposal is the way I should have said it, and other related bills. And then we even had a couple of bills about fossil fuel accountability that Jeff and others worked on. One, for example, on the Fossil Fuel Divestment Act, trying to get pension prohibition for pension funds to invest in fossil fuel companies. And then we had buildings. We had a bunch of areas in the buildings category that Rachel and her team had been working on. A big one on the Clean and Healthy Buildings Act that we were also behind with some sub bills. There were a couple in the agriculture category, and some on open space and conservation. So altogether, our chapter prioritized not the whole number of like 80 to 90 bills in the environmental area, but a subset of them that we thought were the most important and that we could focus on. Now, the sad news here, as Jen Walling put it, she's from the Illinois Environmental Council. When she summarized the session verbally to us, she said, in the 14 years that I've been here, this is the losingest session we have ever had in the environmental community. And what she meant by that is that we were only able to pass one bill to protect the Muhammad Aquifer from having wells and storage wells drilled into and under it for carbon capture and sequestration. We were successful in passing that one, and a couple of others that I can mention in a minute. But her point was the successes or those passed are very, very small number. And some of the ones passed are, kind of what would you call it? They're the first step in doing something. Like, for example, the legislature passed a task force to work on what kind of climate mitigation was going to be needed in our state for the future as climate change deepens and does more damage. So, in other words, they passed a task force. They didn't pass anything that what I'd call implementation of any programs. So what happened overall, because I know we don't have time today to go through every bill and what happened to every one of them, but in general, some of the bigger bills, just as they called it, ran out of time, meaning they might have gotten passed in the House or the Senate, but they didn't make it to the other chamber, or it didn't happen soon enough for June 1 before June 1st. But when you really get behind the scenes and ask a lot of people, which I have been doing, what most people had to say was, the governor did not want any bills that would increase the state budget deficit. So he was being very hard line about any money that would be in addition to the budget that he put out in February. And and an example, just so you know how hard line it really was, there was a bill about protecting wetlands in Illinois, which, as you know, sequester carbon, and they do a lot of other things too, but they're an important nature-based solution. Well, the protection of wetlands would have taken about $3 million annually for the Illinois Natural Resources Department. Now, $3 million in a budget that is as big as Illinois is like, practically a rounding error. But that did not get passed because the governor was not going to support it. And so on the one hand, it was a tight budget year, and so no new programs that were going to cost money were going to be passed. But the second bigger issue that everybody agreed on is that the big bill that Trump passed with one vote, that bill was hanging over the legislature. They did not know what the outcome was going to be of the big, beautiful bill and how it was going to affect Illinois' revenue from the federal government. So the legislators got very conservative and did not want to take any action that would cost money, not knowing how much money we were going to lose. So what has happened, and one example of it is the Metropolitan what's it called? The Metropolitan Mobility Act. As you know, if you've been reading the papers in Chicago, there's an enormous shortfall that has to be filled, or the transit system will have to start cutting services. So instead of acting on that in May, they essentially, I think, waited through the summer to see what would happen with Trump's bill. And now this will be brought up again in the veto session, which is going to occur in October. And the veto session is not really a veto session anymore. I think it's more of it's a session where anything that didn't get dealt with that was really important has another chance to get brought up again during the current year. So that one, for example, will be brought up again in this very short, I think it's like 3 days, it might be more, but it's not very many days session where there's a chance to revisit some of these, but not most of them. So so where I think we stand for January of 2026 is this. This is the second year of the General Assembly in Illinois. There are 2-year sessions. And this is the second year of a 2-year session. Why is that important? Because we don't have to reintroduce bills from scratch. Bills already have numbers. They already have purpose. Senators or House reps can reintroduce them, essentially with the same numbers and the same content if they wish to. And so a number of the things we care about are going to be reintroduced. Now, the bad news about January is that it's an election year. And everybody at the IEC says that you don't get very many bills passed in an election year. However, there are a number of ideas that people are really excited about pushing on. And most of them are things that we as a chapter already care about. Like the Clean and Reliable Grid Act, like the Clean Buildings Act, and like the Clean Transportation Act, and the plastic bans of foam foodware, plastic straws, etc., and also
Yeah. Okay.
other things.
How's school going?
I'm sorry, was that?
Pardon? First week of seventh grade. Easy.
Oh,
Tom, could you please go in the
Kindergarten.
participants list and mute
yeah,
the
Karen, do you
person?
think you could turn your put your thank you. Thank you very much. So we're what we're going to do is we're going to reform a legislative action team again for Illinois. We're going to see if there are any other ideas from our chapter of things you would like to see put forward. And an example of that, by the way, is Jeff and I have been talking with the Center for Climate Integrity about another fossil fuel accountability bill that got introduced last year but didn't go anywhere, called the Extreme Weather Recovery Act. And what it allows to happen is a person or an entity could take out a lawsuit against a fossil fuel company for damages of one sort or another. So it is an opportunity to sue them that would be opened up by such a bill. And the Center for Climate Integrity is very encouraged about this kind of bill and sees other states maybe taking similar action. So that would be a brand new one that we would want to introduce in the January session. And there may be others that some of you have in mind that you think we should put in there, even if it doesn't pass in 26, because most of the bills that I've seen take sometimes 2, 3, 4 years to pass, depending on how big of a lift they are. They take a lot of time to pass. So some of the things that I know we will be pushing in 26, in addition to the Extreme Weather Recovery Act, will be the Clean and Reliable Grid affordability. I know we'll be behind that again. The Clean and Equitable Transportation Act. I don't know if Bruce is going to want to revisit the electric school bus money, because it's a year where I doubt we'll get a lot of money from the state. I know that the plastic reduction group is going to reintroduce plastic disposable foodware, getting use of single-use plastic bags. And then there's a couple bills related to composting that they're going to continue to push. So I know those are going to happen. And then the Clean and Healthy Buildings Act, I believe that the senator is going to reintroduce this bill, although I haven't been as close to the buildings area, maybe Rachel, as you are. So you may have more up-to-date info, but as I understood it last, they were going to reintroduce it. And there will be, there was a small win in that, it's, what's the name of the forever chemical?
PFAS.
PFAS, yeah. We did get a ban on PFAS passed in for a few products. And so that was a small win, and people would like to extend it to other products. And there is, let me see if I've missed any major ones that I think we will go after again. Oh, the Deforestation Free Illinois Act, which uh, requires the state to procure products that did not cause deforestation in the tropics. And that's important because the state purchases a lot of stuff. So getting that will be reintroduced. And there may be another pesticide bill, a ban on glyphosate that may get reintroduced. So these are some of the ones I know about already, but they're emerging now because September and October are the months where all of the priorities for January are determined by us and other groups that belong to the Illinois Environmental Council. So if any of you have an idea or a thing that you were hoping was going to pass last year, or that you'd like to see some piece of policy on, and you've not seen it yet, that this is the time to get to me, so that our team can take it up and get it turned into a bill and find a sponsor for it. I mean, any of these ideas can be turned into a bill if you can find a sponsor for them. And then you can take them from there into the actual General Assembly, hoping that it gets to a committee, hoping that it gets a hearing, and working to try to get it introduced on the general floor of the state assembly. And I believe that a lot of things here in Illinois matter more than ever because of everything we just heard about at the federal level. And maybe we should be doing something about an endangerment finding for Illinois. I started thinking about that when Jeff was talking. I thought, well, maybe we need to take some preventative action in case this is repealed. And perhaps that's something we should be considering as a bill that we would introduce in our legislature. But at least we have a more progressive legislature than one would see, in some other states. And we need to protect ourselves from the Trump administration, however we can. So I'm just putting out now a call for you to come forward with any idea. Any idea can be on the table and discussed as a possible piece of legislation. And it may not pass in 26, but that doesn't matter. What matters is to socialize it, get it on the table, get people to hear about it, bring data to bear on it, in other words, get people excited about it. So that's what I'm asking. And, it's certainly open for questions about any of the details.
You have some questions for Pam?
No questions?
Quick comment, Pam, and to everyone. Stop using Glide dental floss. It's coated with PFAS.
No, really?
Sorry.
Oh, that's good to know.
I wonder if that's what I bought today. I'll have to check.
Yeah, well, it's amazing how these forever chemicals get in everything, that you don't even realize they're there.
One more chance for Pam. Any other questions? And we'll go to the next step with Karen and Rachel. Yes, John.
Yeah, I'll be quick. Two comments, Pam. Since the wetlands preservation is such a small price tag for seemingly a very good benefit, I would suggest putting some effort to that.
Yeah, John,
as
I
an
agree.
achievable, very achievable goal for a good result.
I
Um,
agree. And I will be pushing for that in the Illinois Environmental Council meetings for sure. Absolutely.
And the second one I have is just a thought that buzzes in my head. It's not a good thought, but it is a thought that comes up when you said endangerment at state level. Well, we have the Supreme Court, if I got this right, overriding the California exception. Isn't that what occurred? And so, therefore, are we just going to have the same repeat if we do an endangerment push in Illinois?
I guess we won't know until we try,
Okay.
you know?
So,
And that might also be contested in the court.
Right.
Oh, well.
okay. Thanks.
Okay, is that it? Let's move on to Karen Data and Rachel Fredericks. Go ahead, Rachel and Karen.
We thought that it would be actually timely in light of this conversation and just the weightiness and heaviness of the things that we are all trying to learn to tolerate and maintain some sense of hope and energy for fighting. What sometimes feels like a really Sisyphean task of trying to push environmental issues in a climate that, no pun intended, is really inhospitable. And so we really just wanted to take some time today to just talk together about how we're all feeling about that and to just share kind of our thoughts and our feelings and really to just come together as a community to talk about those things, because I don't know that we all have spaces to really talk about the weightiness that we feel, the grief that we feel, the anger that we feel, just the range of emotions. So Rachel has put together an activity that will help us deepen kind of our connection into those things. And then we're going to move into some breakout groups just to be able to talk to one another in a more intimate way. So I'll turn it over to Rachel.
Thanks, Karen, and thanks everybody for joining us tonight, in part to talk about climate emotions, which are just so important. Just last night, I was on a webinar with the Environmental Voter Project where I learned about some of their recent polling, which shows that many, many, many Americans are somewhere between somewhat and very or extremely concerned about climate change. But an awful lot of those people think that they're in the minority. They don't think that the majority of people share their concern, even though most people do to some extent. And that's a terrible disconnect. It's bad for our individual mental health because we experience cognitive dissonance when we talk about bad news without acknowledging bad feelings that come with it. But the disconnect is also bad for our collective activism because that false belief about other people makes it hard to get and stay motivated as activists. So, next, we're going to be doing an activity to help us reflect on and express our climate emotions, and also to experience solidarity with each other as we do that. So I was introduced to this sort of activity via Philosophers for Sustainability, a group I'm part of. Krista Heiser led us through it, and many of us found it quite powerful. So I've adapted it for us tonight. But I'll provide a link to the recording of that session in the chat in case anyone wants to follow up and get some background about how this activity was developed. So to get started, I'll invite you, if you like, to turn off your video, actually. Give yourself a little bit of privacy to feel your feelings, if you like that. You can do that by clicking on the video icon at the bottom of the Zoom window, but you don't have to if you don't want to. Next, I'll also invite you to change your name on the Zoom screen so that you can share in the chat anonymously if that's more comfortable. You can consider replacing your name with something you feel grateful for. You can do that by moving your cursor into the box with your own picture or name on it on the Zoom screen, Once your cursor is on your Zoom box, you should see 3 little dots in the upper right-hand corner of the box. You can click on those 3 dots and you'll get a pop-up window that allows you to rename yourself to whatever you choose. My suggestion was something that you're grateful for. And again, you can skip this, but it might be nice to share confidentially about your feelings. Now, I'm going to present you with some sentence starters, one at a time. And for each one, I welcome you to take some time to complete the sentence by typing into the chat. If you don't have your chat window open already, you can access it by clicking chat with the little talking bubbles down at the bottom of your Zoom screen. If you don't know what to say to complete the sentence starter, I encourage you to just respond to others by typing something like, I hear you, or of course, or some other message of support. So take a deep breath. And here's the first sentence starter for you to complete in the chat with whatever feels right. I feel afraid about, or I'm scared that. We all have, probably all of us have fears about the climate crisis, and they can take a lot of shapes. And can think about what specific aspects scary. I see people are afraid the world will fall apart. People are afraid of their grandkids' future. That science is being undermined. That dictatorship will ruin our country even more. That government can't be changed. That democracy will end. Fear about a daughter's future. Of course, those things are scary. We hear you. Take a deep breath. It's okay to acknowledge that fear.
Thank you, John. Thank you.
And we'll shift to another sentence starter. I'm angry about, or I'm so mad that. I'm enraged about some aspect of the climate crisis. Yeah, somebody's afraid of, or sorry, angry about being powerless. I can echo that. Anger about people not listening. Anger about disinformation and lies. A lot of anger. Of course, we hear you. Of course. Anger, enragement that people are deliberately undermining progress for short-term benefit. Angry at people who didn't vote. Of course, we hear you. Anger that people are getting rich by destroying the world we all depend on. Of course, we hear you. Take a deep breath and we'll shift. And the next prompt is, I'm so sad about, or it saddens me. Losing beauty, very sad. Sad that America's turning its back on the world, that we won't know our full potential. A lot of sad things. Voiceless living beings are being destroyed. Sad, of course. We hear you. Sad about other people's sadness. Um, Sad about timing pressure. Of course, we hear you in your sadness. We'll take a deep breath. We'll shift once again. Many people might feel some shame. You might complete the sentence, I'm ashamed about, or I feel shame that something. Shame about um, our leaders. Uh, Shame about the way our country is hurting other people. Um, Shame about not living up to God's expectations. Shame about not doing enough or being too quiet. A lot of hard feelings there. And of course, we hear you. Um, Sometimes people feel shame. Someone mentions in the chat about shame about being privileged enough to protect ourselves, but not everybody else. Of course, we hear you. Take a deep breath and shift. In the interest of time, this will be our last one. I'm hopeful that I feel hope about whatever it is that you might be able to find some hope in. We'd love to share that with you. When someone's with their climate concerned colleagues and friends, hopeful that the truth will come out, hoping it's soon enough. Um, Hopeful about reaching young people to make change. Um, Hopeful that us and others won't give up. Hope that we can reverse some of what's happening. Of course, we hear you. Um, I really appreciate your participation in this activity. Acknowledging what makes us sad draws our attention to the things that we love. Acknowledging what makes us afraid demonstrates our courage. Our ability to share what makes us afraid demonstrates courage and allows us to build trust in each other. Acknowledging what makes us angry reminds us of our passion for justice. Acknowledging and then releasing our shame opens up all sorts of new possibilities. And of course, acknowledging our hope gives us something to hold on to as we move forward. We'll split up into breakout rooms so that we can verbally interact with each other a little bit. We're short on time. We go till 7:15. Once we're in small groups, we'll have an opportunity to possibly respond to the activity we just did, but also to the following two questions, which I will put in the chat so that hopefully you should be able to read them in your breakout rooms once you're in there. So the two questions are, what are the hardest aspects of the climate crisis for you, and how do you replenish yourself? Once we're in breakout rooms, we'll maybe do, let's say, 7 minutes for discussion, and then we'll come back to the whole group for another 7 minutes of discussion so we can share and maybe find some strength or renewal or an action plan or a bright spot, which with to end the evening.
What do you
But
want? Three or
before
four? Three or four groups?
yeah, maybe four. Yeah. And
Okay.
before we do that, I'll just remind folks who turn their cameras off or change their Zoom names that if you haven't already, now might be a good time to turn those cameras back on or to change your Zoom name back to your standard name by going to those three dots in the top of your Zoom box. So I think that's enough for me. Time for breakout rooms.
Did you say four? Here we go.
Yes, please, Tom.
Well, I'm not sure fireflies, I think that's an AI thing. I'm not sure that's going to really interact, but it might be just Martha and Tom. Are you there, Martha?
Yes. Can you,
Okay. I guess we're supposed to do the hardest aspect first. Then how do we replenish ourselves? Mhm. Are you there? John, are you with us in this one?
powerlessness or of futility or of that crazy report that I was just reading, that it's all fake or that it's all whatever. And that they're protecting themselves in some way from that. They're protecting themselves from that horrible hurt that goes with the realization that we might be in grave danger.
Yeah, I I think that's such a great point about trying to be generous in imagining where folks are coming from. One thing that I found, and this may or may not be helpful to you, Martha, it's just for whatever it's worth. Um, there's so much negative stuff about climate change, obviously. Um, but sometimes if you can find a way to invite someone to be in it with you in some sense, rather than like focusing on this is also bad, this is also bad, because like we know that, and as you know, they're like resisting that mentally because it's too hard. But if you say something like, here's the thing I'm doing, do you want to do this with me? Um, like people like being invited into things, whether it's an activity or a place or a way of thinking. Um, and if you phrase it as an invitation, or if you think of it that way when you present ideas to them as invitations, um, then sometimes they're more likely to get on board um, than things that are going to make them feel guilty because they're not already doing it or they didn't already know or whatever. So that's just a suggestion for whatever it's worth.
I don't think that they see me as being forceful or trying to make them feel guilty. They just think I'm a bit eccentric. They think it's sort of cute. It's not cute, you know.
Yeah.
So that's that crazy Martha. She won't take plastic. Or, oh, she's got that composting pail down and shipping and receiving. They like me, but they think I'm a little out there, and I don't know how to get across to
It
them.
means you're the vanguard, Martha. You're on the right side, and the more you do your little things and the more people see it, the more it's going to be normalized. It takes a lot to normalize new stuff.
Yeah.
It takes a lot of people doing it a lot of times. And that's how normalization happens. So
Crossing my fingers.
solidarity, solidarity. Yeah, other thoughts?
I definitely feel like I replenish myself with being in company with people, extracting myself from the news and the digital feeds and actually being in a room with people, even a Zoom room. I think that, I think it has its value, but preferably being actually with people. It sort of, that helps. Or being completely without people at the ocean or, somewhere in nature. So
I don't know.
Yeah, that resonates with me.
On the replenishment thing, I just personally, I've been involved in disinformation meetings lately with other chapters, climate reality chapters, and you know, why selection of people, even though they're climate reality people, and it seems like it's so clear to everybody the world we're in is a bunch of lies, and I think it's helpful to people when they see the lie, and next to it they see the truth. And that's personally what I've been doing lately. It's easy to just deny, this is a lie and all that kind of stuff. But it's one thing when you really think about here's the lie and here's the truth. And then what are you going to do about it? I think people feel that progress is motivating.
Yeah, I think action and progress are motivating for a lot of people. Certainly for me, I can say that even if the progress is tiny, even if the action is tiny, that keeps you going to do
Yeah.
another one another day.
Yeah.
Um,
I have trouble with the tiny. I've spent most of my life in business where there is no tiny. There's top three things you're going to do. And that's what you're going to be paid for. And that's what's so important. And, strategic plans and all that kind of thing. So in climate circle, there's 100 things you could do. And unfortunately, not the 100 things are the most important. So clearly, everybody's got their thing. But I have trouble coping with the maybe the things that from an emissions point of view are more minor. That's a personal thing with me.
Understandable. I see that it's 7:10. We ran a little long on some of the
We
earlier
should
stuff,
go
so I
back.
think we should probably close the breakout rooms
Yeah, I'll do
and go
that.
back to the big group in case people have questions or share outs.
Okay, here we go. Well, I said close them all. I guess they did. Okay.
I didn't mean to close it, but I wanted to get the little screen off.
But it doesn't look like everybody came back.
Not yet.
So
Well, it said we had about a minute, and
oh,
then
wait a minute.
I hit that message to make it
Oh,
go away, and
maybe
then
that's it. Okay, they're
sudden
going to
I
close in
was,
23 seconds. All right, sorry.
Okay.
I forgot when you hit the button, it doesn't happen immediately.
oh, it did to me. I'm right here.
Um, thank you all for kind of coming back, and we wanted to just take a couple minutes, like maybe 3 or 4, and just share some of the things that maybe people were talking about in their breakout groups. And our group was just ending on a really interesting note. And Dave, do you want to kind of highlight kind of what you were talking about?
Well, just briefly, I'm kind of a big fan of a bottoms-up approach on climate. You do it because it's the right thing to do. But one of the things that I'm mentioning that I did a long consulting assignment with the Navajo tribe. And what I learned from them, and my bachelor's degree is in anthropology, although I've been a computer scientist all the rest of the time, is that whenever they thought it was us and then me, and our problem in our society is we think me and then maybe us. And so, really we need that kind of fundamental cultural change of where you recognize you're part of a community, part of a tribe, and what you do affects other people. Did I hit it right?
Yeah,
Okay, there you go.
good.
Yeah.
Other things people talked about or want to share out with the bigger group?
Well, I think we found it very discouraging that despite the fact that the big majority of the people think in the US think it's real, and people throughout the world, I think.
Yeah.
You have a situation like the climate conference or the plastics conference that just ended, where the powerful petrostates and lobbyists prevailed. So how do you fight that power?
Yeah.
And greed.
It's back to big business. Yeah, oil and gas, whatever. You know,
Our group
everybody.
was like, do it with your pocketbook.
What's that?
Do it with your pocketbook, that if people stopped using plastic, I
Yeah.
mean,
I,
simple, but it's
I
not.
agree. I just don't think climate groups, even our own, we try and do total cost of ownership and all that kind of stuff. I think we need to do more of that. I think money talks, And the big argument from the fossil fuel industry, I mean, I saw it at the Naperville City Council meeting just the other night, is money. It's all about money. And then emissions come next. Now, one could argue that emissions are about money, but I'm just saying the way a lot of people see it, if it affects
Mhm.
them personally.
Yeah.
But it
We
is
got about a minute or
disheartening.
so left. Anything else?
No, I appreciate the chance to talk about this, though.
Yeah, it was good.
Yeah, it was pretty fun.
I liked the exercise.
Yeah.
It made me very sad, but I liked
Yeah, no, it does make you sad.
Well, you
The
look
first
at the,
time I did it, I cried, and I was not the only person on the call.
yeah.
I could see that.
Well, the title of this member meeting is a miserable moment. That's a little depressing too, but hopefully it's helped some.
I
But
think
it helps
we
to be
found
able to
solace.
share.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, Jeff, go.
I just said I think we found some solace.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Well, let's make sure we continue to link arms and keep on moving.
Yeah, all you can
Focus
do.
on the state, Illinois. Focus on that.
Yeah.
That's the big deal now.
And thank you all for coming who come from near as well as far. We welcome you here and we're glad to see you.
Final
Thank you.
comment?
I think linking arms and keep going is a good final comment.
Yeah.
I do too.
All right. Thank you,
Thank you.
everybody.
Thank
Bye,
you.
everyone.